Hey everyone. All right, so now that you have mastered several types of graphs, we're going to go back to a pretty basic one, but we're going to start altering what our axes look like. So we are going to do two line graphs in Google Sheets, but this time we're going to do pressure and wind. So because last time we were looking at our data, right, and I had you put your wind, speed, and direction in the same column, we actually can't do that. So what we want to do in order to actually view our data is we want to split this into two columns. So if you highlight the whole column and then you right click, you want to insert one to the left. Once you insert this one to the left, what we're going to put in here is our wind speed, just our wind speed. And what you can do is just copy the data from here straight over, and all you need are the numbers. So I can go 5, 32, 21, 9, 14. Now, this seems kind of tedious, but it actually shouldn't take you too long. It's just transferring over the numbers. So if you know where these numbers are on your keypad, it should be pretty darn fast. If you don't know where they are on your keypad, well, you could use the practice anyway. So here we are, 6, 6, 14, 3, 13, 20, 13, 8, 6, 13. Just like that, we're done. Took less than a minute, piece of cake. So this wind speed is what I'm going to use with my pressure in millibars. So again, I'm going to make my two-line graph. I need to highlight my date because that is going to be what I'm comparing everything to. What's the pressure on which day? So once I have my date highlighted, I'm going to hold down Command, and I'm going to highlight all of my pressure as well. So just like that. And now, of course, I'm going to add my wind speed. Boom. And I should have put miles per hour in the title. That's all right. I can go back and do that later. So now that I have all my data highlighted, I've got date, pressure, wind speed, I can make a chart. So I'm going to insert my chart as per usual. And you can see that, this chart doesn't look all that great. This data is quite spread out. So that doesn't mean I've done anything wrong. It just means I need to fix how my data is portrayed in this chart. So this line chart is exactly what we want to keep. I'm going to go to my customize, and this is where we're going to do all of our changes. We're going to go down to our series, and instead of applying to all series, we're going to pick one at a time. Our pressure, I'm going to put pressure in purple because I want to, and I'm making the rules here. So I'm putting pressure, and I'm going to keep that as my left axis. That is totally fine. But you can see my wind speed, I'm going to be measuring that in completely different numbers because it's a much smaller value. So I'm going to change the color to, what do I want to use? What should I use? How about I use, like a pale blue? Yeah, that should be fine. And those colors look good together. But I'm going to change this axis to the right axis. That way I can compare my data separately while still on the same grid. So I've got my wind speed in here. It's my light blue. I've got my pressure in purple. You can see my legend up there is totally helping me out, which is awesome. I'm going to go back up to my chart and axis titles, and I'm going to change the chart title. As per usual, we're going to make sure everyone knows what data we're talking about. I chose Tower, Minnesota as my city, so I'm putting that in the title so everyone knows what I'm talking about. And we're talking about the pressure and wind speed. That's what we're comparing there. I'm going to bold it, italicize it, put it right there in the middle, and there we go. I've got my title. Now I'm going to make sure all my other titles are working correctly as well. My horizontal axis title, I'm taking that colon out of there. Again, I'm being nitpicky because I can. I'm going to bold and italicize it. For my vertical axis, now remember this doesn't say right vertical axis, so it's talking about my left vertical axis, even though it's not stated. And here it's giving me my two options. So if I'm using temperature, I could do that. If I'm using humidity, I could do that. But I'm not using either of those things. On that side, I'm actually using pressure in millibars. And you can see I've got my purple over here. Pressure in millibars is absolutely what I'm using on that left-hand side. I've got my bold, I've got my italics, and there we go. If I go to my right vertical axis, remember this one is for my wind speed on that side. So I'm going to say wind speed, and of course we're measuring that in miles per hour. So even though before I didn't have miles per hour in my title, here I can still insert it into my graph, and it's a piece of cake. So I've got wind speed, bold it, italicize it, because yay for consistency. And just like that, I got all my stuff. So I'm going to go down. My legend looks good. my horizontal axis. Now we're going to take a look at this again. And again, I'm going to treat my labels as text. I want to see all of those dates. That's a personal preference. I really like being able to look at this specific data point and see, okay, that was definitely on the 8th. So I'm going to treat label as text, and those are slanted the way I want them to be. So that's going to be good to go. Now, vertical axes. This one's going to be my left vertical axis. So we're treating the labels as text. That's totally fine. But here's the problem. If you take a look at the purple, look how high it is on our chart. We don't want that. When we're looking at data, we want our data to take up as much space as possible. Now, if you are observing a graph, this is something to keep an eye out for because the scale matters. If the scale is really, really small and you see huge jumps, it's not that big of a change. But when we're looking at pressure, small changes actually have huge impacts. So we are going to actually change our minimum value and our maximum value. Now, I already looked at all my data. My lowest pressure is somewhere around 950. So I'm going to set my minimum value below that because I want to make sure my data is right in the middle. So I'm going to take 940 as my minimum and 980 as my maximum. That gives me a nice range. Oh gosh, that gives me a nice range. Oh no, why is it counting like that? Uh-oh. Allow bounds to hide data. Ooh, that worked. All right, so I allowed bounds to hide data. There we go. So now I have my 940 all the way down here to my 980 up top. And it is allowing me to see all of that data zoomed in. That's really helpful when we're looking at pressure, and especially if we're going to be comparing it to our wind speed that's there in blue. So scale factor, I don't need to change that. The default scale factor has made that, so it's counting up by tens, which is actually really convenient. So I'm done with that vertical axis. I can take a look at my right vertical axis, but I don't really need to. This one covers up most of the graph. You can see I have my really high data over here where it's over 30 miles an hour. And then on this side, I have everything that's all the way from like 0 and goes all the way up. So it covers all of my data that I want it to. And now I can look at my graph and I can see my data is nicely zoomed in. I've got good scales on my right axis and on my left axis. Everything is labeled. It's looking good. I can click off of it. And if I click back on it, it'll highlight the whole thing for me. I can copy it. I'll paste it onto my other chart and I'm good to go. Just like that, I've graphed 2 lines and I altered the scale. Yay! If you have any questions, please feel free to comment or ask Ms. Bird. Other than that, thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.